you have to pay immense attention to what you're reading, because if you don't pay enough attention, you will have to reread the text over and over again. And if you find yourself rereading the text over and over again, that means that you haven't paid enough attention. And that means you haven't grasped, haven't understood anything clearly, so that you're going to have to reread it. And after 2 or 3 or 4 times, you understand what is going on. That means that you haven't paid enough of attention in the very first few times. So every time you try to read, or skip to another, for example, even in homework, try to take a deep breath and then refocus your mind onto what you're doing, because it's creating you a very bad habit of not giving yourself enough focus into the reading section. But the reading section requires immense focus, especially for shorter paragraphs. Don't you think that they would have another way to evaluate you on such a short paragraph as opposed to the longer paragraphs as passages in the last test? Yes, they do have different ways. For example, they have poems, and poems is actually not really difficult, but you're going to have to pay extra attention to the wordings and the structure of it, the poems. And also questions like this, it will be a bit more difficult, but nothing that you couldn't do without with the help of POE. So that's how you're going to approach reading, and that's a tip. Don't read out everything. Especially do not mouth it. Yes, don't you mouth the words. Just read it with your eyes or internally. Don't read it, because your mouth is actually slower than what your mind can read. So don't slow yourself down. So normally I would use the mouse, because this is the digital SAT, so you can use your mouse. Firstly, do not ever use the trackpad on the key. If you have a laptop, obviously you're gonna have to bring the laptop to the SAT. But if you have a trackpad on it and you are used to using your trackpad on the laptop, do not use it, and always use your mouse, because don't ask, all right? It will be immensely at a disadvantage to you. Next, you just use your eye and use your mouse, your cursor, to scroll and to swipe over the text which you are reading. In the past, I would suggest my students to use the pencil for the for paper SAT, but in this case, you use your cursor. It's the same thing. You read like this, or this. Pay close attention and do not read every single word. Right? That's the thing. That's it. And it only works if you pay enough attention, because if you don't pay enough attention, it will waste you more time. So whether or not you're gonna be able to use this depends on your ability to focus on that specific paragraph. And recap: if you can't focus, change your position. For example, you're putting your legs up on like sitting, so you can put your legs down, like for example like that, or change your posture. For example, you leaning forward, then you lean back, or you lean left, right. You change your posture, you change the way of sitting, and then you can refocus. That's scientifically provable. And if you find yourself difficult to focus, you can breathe, you can change your posture, change your sitting position, and try your best, because even when you do homework, it will help you immensely to form a good habit, right? For August SAT test takers, you guys can focus more on the math section, and so this won't be much of an issue, because math is very short and it requires constant thinking. You don't have to read entire thing, and reading can be boring, right? You can drag off and you can forget that you are having an SAT to take. So that's why you're going to get bored and you get unfocused. You lose your focus. So that's other ways to combat it. So I think I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to do the third question. Just I'm not going to read it out loud, and I'm going to use the cursor. Pay close attention to the cursor to the screen, all right? And I'm going to note it. And if you have any questions, just tell me, because I'm going to note it. Ask for me to read, right? And that's the same way you can apply it to, because you don't really have the pen on the SAT. You're gonna have to annotate in your paper in a way that makes it easier for you to read. right? Starting with x1, the first one. So text 1 to text 2. Taste Edna Lewis. So it's B, right? So that's how I did it. And if you, I'm going to give you a few minutes, a few seconds to sink that in. And if you don't have any question, I'm going to ask one of you to explain why B is correct, right? Okay, let's start off with Lina. Why do you think B is correct based on what I just did?
According to a text form, no, the question asks that the author of text form don't mostly reflect the situation presented in the aligned sentence in text 2 and the underlined sentence in text 2 is um, in summary, it talks about the masterpiece that has no attention from literary scholars. And in the text 2, in the text 1, the cookbooks attract the least scholarly attention, and its complexity and historical significance are often overlooked. So the idea in the text 1 is opposite to the text 2. To the form mentioned answers, C is not correct because as justifiable. No, it is not mentioned. It is not related to the question. D is not correct because it mentioned about other genes, and other genes are not mentioned in the text 1 or text 2. A is also not correct because they said that because scholars are dismissive of the literary works that it achieve popularity with the general public, and I think that is also not mentioned in the text 1 or text 2, so be correct.
Okay, so very good. There's only one thing that I would change about your explanation, otherwise it's perfect, is that you said that the text 1 and text 2, they are opposing each other. In fact, there are three fundamental relationships on two paragraphs when there are two texts involved. Cross-text questions, firstly, is supporting. And secondly, of course, is contrasting. Just like sentences, in paragraphs, they can either support or contrast, or they can give out causation. This is what I would classify as other in transition. So the most common thing in other is actually causation. If you pay enough attention to the previous lessons, you would see that Either it is supporting or contrasting or causation. There are rarely ever an other question, but actually I classified this one as a subset of other. But in the case of paragraphs, there are only 3 relationships. But to make this less confusing as it is, I'm going to merge causation to supporting. Because when you give out an explanation, you are just basically, fundamentally, you are accepting the reasoning, and then you give out an explanation for that. That means that you're supporting an evidence by a cause, by a reason. That's why I would consider causation as a supporting relationship, and contrasting is everything opposite. So in text 1 and text 2 is specifying a specific case. I read through this and I can see the underlying portion is that this book receives no attention whatsoever. And the same thing has been mentioned above on text 1, is that it really, with this genre, cookbooks has the least scholarly attention of all. And that's what taking into account here. So we can see 2 things. They are correlating to each other. So this is supporting or causation. So this is what I would make a symbol for supporting. You can create your own symbol, but you can follow mine. This is contrasting and this is supporting. Okay, this is my symbol annotation because it makes it sense and it makes it faster to do. Always rely on trying to annotate in your text sheet and just trying to scrap it in your paper so that you can remember what's going on. And if you don't have that habit, that's okay. Some people don't really find it helpful to annotate at all, but I'm from the paper SAT era, so the habit of annotating sticks with me. Anything you would do, but in contrast to actually annotating, you would use your cursor and then just select things like this, just like using cursor in Word, in text processes. You can highlight it, and then that will be the same. This is so in summary, I chose B because very simply I can conclude this one as a supporting causation or supporting. I can cross out C because this is justifiable. That means it's not acknowledging that if this is justifiable, it means text 1 is not acknowledging the reality of text 2. That's false. And as inevitable is not necessarily wrong, but in other genres, this is what we would call too broad of an assumption, inference error. This can be tricky on latter questions. So D is wrong. This one is pretty simple. That's why I made an example for you guys, because it's simple. And question A, and option A, it is dismissive. May be correct because neglective is the same thing as dismissive, but it hasn't ever mentioned anything about works that achieve popularity. It just works in general. Within this genre in general, it's not any work that popular, everything in genre, this genre in general. So that leaves us with B. Unsurprising seems as first as something that's wrong or something that's mean conceding, that's mean accepting the fact. But if you give it more context, because scholarly is this in particular, everything in cookbooks in particular, this is paraphrasing this sentence, right? That's why B is correct, but you can POE. So that leads us to I'm going to do. There's another skill that I want to teach you guys, is that about relying on options to actually understanding the prompts, the paragraphs. I'm going to choose an extremely difficult pair of paragraphs, and I'm going to use it to use the options to prove it to you guys. This one's easy. This one. All right, this one. Quite difficult, right? It seems at first quite lengthy and quite difficult. And to be honest, I'm going to read this and at a slow pace, not as I would normally do, but I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to understand the text 1 and text 2 based on the options. And this one can be applied. This method can be applied if and only if you have run out of time and you haven't done the last question yet, and you still have a tiny tidbit of time, so you don't really have the time to read this, but you read the prompt and you jump straight into POE. That will be quite usable. In contrast to going from text to POE. That's what, because most likely the prompts, the options are going to be phrased quite similar to the paragraphs in a ways that makes us find it easier to understand. So firstly, I'm going to read the two texts, and then I still find it difficult to understand. I'm going to rely on A, B, C, and D. Okay. Text 1. Despite its beautiful prose, remember, some words you can just learn by using your dictionary. And to be honest, for the October test takers, I would suggest you find out and define every single word that you don't know. Do not skip anything after the fact, because you can't really use your dictionary while you doing your homework. But after you've done your homework, you can use it to recheck it, right? Recheck the new words and everything like that. Only use it after the fact. Do not use it while doing. Okay. Despite its beautiful prose, The Guns of August, Barbara Tuchman's 1962 analysis of the start of World War I, asserting weakness as a form of history. It fails to address events before the outbreak of hostility, thereby giving the impression that Germany was the war's principal instigator. Had Tuchman consulted secondary work available to her by scholars such as Luigi Albertini, she would not have neglected the influence of events such in Eastern European Germans' action. Text 2, Barbara Tuchman, The Gun and the engrossing, if dated, introduction to World War I. Tuchman analysis of primary document is laudable. I don't understand what laudable means yet, but her main thesis that European powers committed themselves to a catastrophic outcome by refusing to deviate from military plans developed prior to conflict is implausibly reductive. So this one is a bad thing, and this one is a but. So contrasting, so this one must be positive. Okay. Next, let's rely on POE to understand the context of this. Text 1, the difference between text 1 and text 2. The author of text 1 believes that the scope of Tuchman's research led her to an incorrect interpretation, while, contrasting, the author of text 2 believes that Tuchman's central argument is overly simplistic. Okay, so we can see that this one is incorrect here, fails, and overly simplistic is here, reductive. So these are quite difficult to grasp at first. So don't fret over it. That's why you don't really have to, most of the time only, for the not too difficult SAT questions, you can just rely on the options to make sense of the paragraphs that you're reading. But in some cases, that wouldn't be enough. And in those very tiny little cases, you can just skip it and just randomize it. That'll give you a better chance if you don't really have much time left, and move on with the easier questions. Only like a handful, like 3 or 4 questions like that. And don't let those questions disrupt your process of thinking. So this one is quite easy one. So not too difficult one. Incorrect interpretation, I can remember the word, it fails. And overly simplistic, I don't really know what reductive is, but now I remember reductive is reduce, right? Reduce is decrease, and reductive is decrease in adjective. So simplistic is reductive. How about B, C, and D? Because when you rely on the options to make sense of what you're reading, you're in fact both doing the POE and the understanding at once. Because when you find the POE, the question, the option that makes sense the most, or the right option, it will pretty much precisely align with what you're reading. And suddenly something switches inside your head and, oh, it makes sense, right? So that's how you're going to use POE to make sense of what you're reading. And B, C, let's see first. Should have relied more on work of other historians. The text 1 does not ever mention other historians, but the text 1 writing style of The Guns of August makes it worthwhile to read despite deficiency, exclusively on weakness So this is make it worthwhile. It doesn't tell anything about the value or whether it's worth reading or not. It only talks about it's being wrong, fails. How about D? The author text one claims that Tuxman would agree the World War duty. What? No, this one is just wrong. This is about Tuxman. Tuxman's work is just somewhat wrong. The only difference between text one and text two is the text one says that it's wrong, and text two says overly reductive means that it's too simple. So D is about arguing about whether or not the Germany is the instigator of the World War I of the Western European. And in this case, D is wrong because this is not the main priority that the main aspect in which the two texts differ. So D is wrong. How can I make assumptions like this? How can I just make this as quickly as possible? Just focus, all right? Try to maintain your focus as much as possible, even if you're doing your homework. Even if you consider the homework to be easy or unnecessary at first, you're going to have to focus 100% because only then can you form a habit of staying focused. Remember, if you build, for example, you bodybuilding, you train your muscle, you have to do something called a progressive overload, or you're going to have to push heavier weights each and every time. But when you need to train your focus, your brain is somewhat of a muscle itself. It needs to be trained in doing simple tasks. For example, you try to focus on one paragraph at a time. That's good, that's plausible, and that's doable, right? And then the next time, the next day, the very next day, you're trying to focus on 2 paragraphs at a time. And what gives you the almost 100% increase in focus in the average focus duration. And then the next day you try to double it. Next day, the day after, the day after, of the day after. You try to constantly keep up with a good habit, because remember, good habits it can form, and bad habits it can stick. Okay, so next time, don't just approach a homework as a homework. Approach it as an opportunity for you to train your mind, to train your ability to perform well in the testing environment. Not only will it help you, but it will save your scores. All right. So homework, you can see it's something that's very distant and is unnecessary at first, but actually it's day by day, it's helping you in one way, shape, or form, one or another. So that's how what did I choose? Okay, I chose A. I almost forgot to circle it. So if you guys don't have any question about this one, I'm going to carry on, and then it's your turn, okay? Try to explain it the way I did. If you can't, just try to POE as much as possible, all right? I chose A because, firstly, I don't really understand the paragraph, but it aligns me with the paragraph. With some, when you read, is if you pay enough of attention, it's not that you don't get the paragraph. It's just you haven't had enough information, because some of the vocabularies are quite too difficult for you to understand. So you're gonna have to rely on the text, the prompts. The options, the multiple options. And by reading the multiple options, you can fill in the gaps by simpler words. And after you filled in the gaps, something clicks, and then you understood completely the entire thing. And that may seem innocuous or inconceivable at first, but it will work. And try to believe me, do not ever reread the paragraph. If you, for example, despite what does prose mean, and then I'm gonna the gun of August Barbara Tuxman, and then I'm going to repeat what does prose mean, because I haven't understood it yet. That's the temptation. That's what we'll do if we haven't practiced enough, if we haven't trained our minds enough. We haven't trained us to be able to skip on the information that are unnecessary and that's just unhelpful in general. So do not reread if you've paid 100% attention, but just continue. The fact that you haven't understood doesn't mean that you will, but you need more context, okay? So this goes to show with the August test takers also. I'm trying to make clear for to conclude your skills even further. And it will tremendously help all of you in the quest of preparing for a more distant October SAT. And it will be tremendously helpful. Right, carry on. Also, I think on the next week's session, we are going to carry on because we have already finished everything, every aspect of knowledge on the SAT. I'm going to continue the lesson in Vietnamese because it will be a revision process. We no longer have to train our mind to understand in English, although I really love to teaching English. We're going to have to digress and change to Vietnamese. If you find being in English is more attractive or more helpful in one way, shape, or form, I'm sure you guys can find more help in Vietnamese because, well, after all, you guys are still needing to conclude your information in total, not just learning the vocabulary. My main goal in teaching in English is to train your way of doing maths. The main thing is to do maths, and then the next main thing is to understand some of the more complicated words I use to make it usable in your sense, because sometimes I use quite advanced words, and that's why I use English. But the days will come, and then we will run out of things to learn, and then we will have to resort back to reviewing. Okay, that's what the next week and the very last phase of the October SAT will lead us. Right, so we're going to carry on our lessons next week in someday next week in Vietnamese, so that it will be way more helpful for you guys in revision. Okay, so to the fourth question, I'm going to ask Ving to do this. Firstly, what did you choose?
I choose D.
All right, D. Wait, let me just change the color. D. Why did you choose D?
APOE.
Okay, precisely. Can you explain it further?
In the question, in the answer A, it doesn't mention the climate of the West African in the text.
All right.
And in answer B is told that the several of the most common, but in the text it just told about the crops, so we didn't know another crops. So
Okay.
I eliminated B.
So this one is too broad. All right. B is wrong. How about C?
C is talk about the methods to cook, the cooking methods, but in the text it doesn't mention.
Text. The author text one and would most likely agree. So, actually, wait, can be toxic. Here, in text two, actually, they do provide an information of how to properly prepare the cassava needed to spread. This is still improve. It still inform us how to cook, but why didn't you choose C? Here.
Yes, but the text that doesn't describe how cassava is cooked.
The methods. Yes, it doesn't describe how at first. Firstly, it only says that they just how to cook, but not precisely what the methods are. So this is wrong. And also, if you pay close attention to the question, would most likely agree with each statement. So text one and text two has to be correct simultaneously. They have to be both correct. So text two, it says about preparing and cooking, but text one, it doesn't say anything about that. Only says about relatively unknown to most region inhabitants until the 1800s, only about the popularity of it being risen after time. So this one is trying to trick us into thinking if we just read this not carefully enough and we rely on our memory instead of relying on the evidence, you'll make it wrong, because if we rely on memory, it will be messed up. So first, next lesson is never rely on your memory. Always try to justify what you're choosing. Always try to find a way in which you eliminate the options you're using, just like Ving did, and just like how I did in the last questions. Okay, so do not ever rely on your kind of memory. Great. Next 5. Let's go to Tâm. Text 5. Question 5. Tâm.
I chose A.
All right. A. Why did you choose A?
I don't remember how, but wait me for 1 sec.
Okay. Take your time. Have you found your answer yet?
I think it's A by using the information in the 2 paragraphs.
Firstly, can you tell me what is the experiment described in text 2?
It we can know that the outcome of the experiment does
This one. At a quantum level. All right, this is the experiment in text 2. And so if we are to choose A, I'm going to summarize the 2 texts for you guys first so that it makes sense in explanation. The idea that time moves only one delivery. According to the second law of thermodynamics, at a macroscopic level, some processes of heat transfer are irreversible due to the production of entropy. This. But laws of physics at a microscopic or quantum level holds that those processes should be reversible. And in text 2, it says that they confirm the irreversibility of thermodynamics. So that means in macroscopic levels, right? So it's true. So they're supporting each other. But the experiment does not pinpoint what causes at the microscopic level, they said. So in this case, how about A? Is A correct or not? This is, remember, text 1 about text 2. It is consistent with the current understanding of physics at a microscopic level, but not at a macroscopic level. So in this case, it is being flipped. This is what we call a distortion of detail or flipped relationship. Okay, this one is macroscopic. Nope, this is proving in the macroscopic level, but we haven't proved in a microscopic, because look, this is thermodynamic and thermodynamic is macroscopic. Macroscopic is big and microscopic is tiny, very small. Quantum mechanics is the physics for the microscopic, and thermodynamics is the physics for something large as a planet and as the universe. Okay, so in this case, microscopic and macroscopic, they've been flipped over. If this were to be changed, this option to be changed in place of microscopic, at place of macroscopic, this will be a bit more precise, right? So A can't be correct because you're getting mistaken with the two very confusing word macro and micro. So pay attention to that one. This is the kind of question that I should have just done it instead of the 11 or 12 question like earlier, because this one is a bit more tricky. And this one has something to do with the distortion of detail. And that's how we know that this is going to be difficult. All right. Yeah, you guessed it right. B. Why did you choose B?
I read it and I felt that the test one it say that like it can explain and the test too, although it it show like the result, but it can explain why does that happen. So I think it's B.
What I would B is actually correct, and that is how I would do if I were to choose one correct answer instead of POE, right? But in this case, if you want to be sure and if you want to be time efficient, use POE. Why? Look, A is incorrect because it is one of the fundamental errors. Firstly, is not mentioned, and secondly, is distortion of detail. In this case, it is distortion of detail. So C, A is wrong because of that, and C, it supports a claim about an isolated system of atoms in a laboratory, but that claim should not be extrapolated to a general claim about the universe. So C is also wrong because it doesn't say anything about extrapolation. Extrapolation is just making assumption, a broad assumption based on the result. Just say, well, you like the color pink, right? So your house must be pink. That is an extrapolation, and that's wildly incorrect. In this case, it is incorrect to say that because it's not mentioned, basically. One of the two fundamental errors. D, it would suggest an interesting direction for future research, were it not for the case of two physicists who conducted the experiment disagree. But in this case, they are supporting each other. This is giving a clue, and this is giving a question, right? So D is also wrong. So that leaves us with B. Although your explanation is actually correct, but that wouldn't how I would necessarily do, or nor do I recommend it to most of you, because it would take time. And if you, it will be way more risky to do it as opposed to doing POE. All right, great. Next is 6. Oh, this one is tricky. Hưng, can you do this for me?
Next, I chose B.
The second one or the fourth one?
B, the second one.
Okay. By arguing that it does not account for the amount of rhythms. Firstly, can you tell me what is Shiraj's hypothesis? Shiraj's hypothesis.
Let me read again, please.
Okay, sure.
He hypothesized that the Chicxulub impactor, DC impactor, whatever. It was likely a member of the class of long period comets.
Now about text 2, what is the main content of text 2? What's the main conclusion?
Given the prevalence of iridium at the crater and more broadly in geological layers deposited worldwide following the impact, Artemyeva argues that an asteroid is more plausible candidate for the C impactor.
All right, very good. So you said this is a C impactor, is shorthanded. Do you think this is supporting or opposing each other?
Opposing.
Correct, because this is comet and this is an asteroid. This is a very different classification of bodies in space. So this is contrasting each other. All right. What you chose B, right? Why B?
Yes. The POE.
Right. So can you tell me why A, C, and D are wrong?
A is wrong because it doesn't overestimate anything.
It doesn't say anything about how Wild 2 is representative of every comets as a class.
Yes.
So this is a
Yes.
too broad of an assumption. How about C?
Praising is not the word. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't think that is the right word to say.
Exactly, because this one is praising, and these are opposing each other. Our Artemisia is on text 2, and these are opposing each other, so it shouldn't be praising. Praising is supporting. C is wrong. Very good. D.
I don't know what concurring means, but in the latter part of D, it says that carbonated chondrites are prevalent in soil samples, but that doesn't explain anything about it doesn't like it doesn't mention anything that the person in text to refer to.
Okay. During the carbonaceous chondrites. The word concur is, these are some of the words I want you guys to remember because concur means agree. Agree. Also the word in fact emphasize. Emphasize is to make clear, and these are the kind of words I want you to remember. What else? Concede. So concur is agree with full support. Concede is agree, but reluctantly. You don't really want to agree it, but you still agree. That means concede, right? And concur is agree wholeheartedly. In this case, if you know what concurring is, you can easily eliminate it. But if not, let's see, carbonaceous chondrites are prevalent in soil samples from sites distant from Chicxulub crater. This one is Artemyeva respond to this one. Let's see if text 1 says anything about soil samples. No, text 2, and it said anything about site distant from Chicxulub crater. There's this. So text 2 doesn't mention anything about carbonaceous chondrites being prevalent in places outer somewhere far from Chicxulub crater. So you can't use make up assumption like that. So D is incorrect. So I believe that's how Hung described it as well. So great, it's B. Okay, POE. Good. Next up is 7. Let's go back to Bike. How about 7?
Number 7 is B.
B. All right. Can you tell me why?
So he has first text he said that the paragraph said that deep admiration
Mm.
for like jazz music
Right. Jazz.
and kind of and like uh and like the rhythms and beats, and in the second text it says about like it in improvisation, a signature characteristic to jazz.
So he is taking inspiration from jazz, even in choreography, right?
Yes.
So this is very good. In this case, this is some of the very rare cases in which you can choose one correct answer as opposed to crossing out the three incorrect ones. So B is influenced by jazz, A is not mentioned, C is obviously not mentioned, D is, yeah, also not mentioned. So the only thing that works here is B, because he is obviously in love with jazz, and the dances and the choreography is taking everything is taken from the inspiration of jazz. So it's B, strongly influenced by jazz. All right, good. Next up, 9. This one, let's go to V. Can you do this for me?
I choose the D.
D, let's see. By cautioning that theory overlooks certain important aspects. Wait. D, can you tell me why?
I just POE again.
Firstly, can you tell me what is the relationship between these two paragraphs?
It's about this the writing system and symbols.
Okay, in text 1, can you tell me what do the symbols signify in text 1? What do they signify?
Uh, individual syllable.
Exactly, individual syllables. So unit is a word, right? And individual syllable is u, in, its, unit. So those are syllables. Syllables is how you pronounce a word, and that is smaller than a word, right? How about text 2? Can you answer me the same question?
Is signify either words or syllables depending on syntax and content at any given time within the text.
Very good. So this one is, if you have two experiments and they have the two different, not, they're not necessarily opposing each other, but they have the different result. Are they contrasting or are they supporting?
Is supporting.
Why is it supporting?
Wait. Interesting words. See. Because the wait, Lacania's theories support wait, the cases.
So if I give you this example, this is research A and this is research B. Oh, oops. Okay. This is research A and this is, gosh. I have to research firstly A and secondly B, and A concludes that the result is 1, and B concludes that result is 1 and 2, and 1 or 2. Are these, so in this case, are these results supporting each other or are they opposing each other?
Opposing?
Exactly, because in literary or in historic passages, in the context of history or literature, if you share one common thing, a similar thing, it can somewhat be considered as supporting, right? But in this case, this is a scientific document and it's a research. So either you have two exactly identical results or two very different results. In this case, A and B, they have two different results, although they share the one, right? So the same goes for text 1 and text 2. Are they opposing or are they supporting?
Opposing?
Opposing, because this one concludes that they signifies individual syllables. The symbols, they signify individual syllables, but in text 2, it says that the symbols, they signify words or syllable, either words or syllable. So these are the very different conclusions. Because these are conclusion, it's the main point of the paragraphs. So they are opposing each other, right? If they're opposing each other, you can pretty much POE out everything besides D. Look, praising, oh, beside B and D, praising and approving. So you're left with B and D. And why don't you choose B?
Because B conflict the text 1. The text 1 status the theories differ from what other scholars believe.
So you're saying that it is like a distortion of detail?
It's conflict the theories in the text 1 and in the answer B. It taught that the work of early scholars.
Okay. So in text 1, it says that assumed words. So this one is actually yes, conflicting with other authors, not influenced by it. So this one is a distortion of detail, a flipped relationship. The same thing goes for the macro and micro, that question that Dum did. Yeah, that's the same thing. So B, pay extra attention to that one, and B is also incorrect. Very good. That leaves us with D. All right, because we are not having much time left, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to do this quickly by myself. This carbon. And this one is good. How about the thumb? Can you do it for me? This one is too good to be left out.
I choose A.
Let's see, why A?
I can draw a conclusion from the two paragraphs that the text one show that the other is really just talk about the advantages of the rewarding farmland, while the other of text two seem more cautious and she and he shows some disadvantages people can encounter, so I choose A.
Right. So this is quite, it seems very difficult at first, right? But in summary, in retrospect, it can be quite easy because it is actually paraphrasing the sentences, not verbatim, not word by word, but just paraphrasing the information from text 1, text 2. So A, correct. Very simple. Yeah, text number 11. Let's see. All right, this one is difficult, so I'm going to do it. Text 1, philosopher G.E. Moore's most influential work entails the concept of common sense. He asserts that there are certain beliefs that all people, including philosopher, know instinctively to be true. So when you read a paragraph, another tip is to place as much question as possible as you are reading it. For example, as I was reading this, philosopher G.E. Moore's most influential work entails the concept of common sense. So place your question in mind. What is the concept of common sense? So that you can almost immediately spot the information. So try to place as much as questions as possible in your head whilst you're reading it. That's what I would call an active reading. And that's how you are going to stay away from distraction. And this is how I pay attention throughout the entire SAT 4 hours that I took. And also, this is the tip that I give out to my previous 2 classes to do this, right? So if you find it difficult to look precisely, to read precisely, place as much of of question as possible, right? That's how you're going to stay focused. What is the concept of common sense? This is including that all people know instinctively to be true. It doesn't have to be explained. They just know that it's true. That is common sense, right? Whether or not they profess otherwise is if they even show that they hated that assumption. I say B is wrong, but in consciousness, or deep within myself, I know that B is right. That's the thing. That's instinctive. Among them, that they have bodies or that they exist in a world with other objects that have 3 dimensions. More careful work on common sense may seem obvious, but in fact groundbreaking. Text 2, external world skepticism is a philosophical stance supporting we cannot be sure of existence of anything outside of our minds. This one is skepticism, right? This one is saying that everything outside of our mind exists, but text 2 presents a skepticism. So Lina, can you tell me if these two, based on the sentences that I've read, can you tell me if these are supporting or opposing each other?
I think it's supporting.
What's that?
I think it's supporting.
Supporting? Supporting or opposing? This is presenting skepticism. So that means you are doubtful. You say that it's not necessarily to be true. That's skepticism. So this is opposing, right? This is opposing for the text 1. Text 1 says, for example, this pen exists outside of my knowledge. And text 2 says, well, that's not necessarily true, is it? So that means they're presenting skepticism. That means it is opposing. Next, during the lecture, once G.E. Moore, this dude, offered a proof refuting the stance by holding out his hand, saying, here's one hand and here's another. They reject it and say it's obviously annoying failure, but I found it challenge to articulate exactly why the proof fails. So this is, remember, philosophy, so it doesn't have to make sense all the time. So you can see that everything around you exists, but in philosophy, does it really exist? Because you see a book is green because the light, your brain perceives it to be green, but is it really green? The same thing goes for if you touch something, you know it exists, it's real, but it's actually sensory data from your hands transmitted to your brain. Therefore, philosophy concludes that sometimes perplexes that information, and they say, is that really true? Yeah, those are basically the works of philosophers and what they do. And this, in this case, this dude is saying everything's outside exist, and the text, the second text is skepticism, is skeptical about the first text. And they say that what is text one most likely respond to text two? By pointing that more would assert that external world is at odds with other beliefs, those proponents must unavoidably hold. Proponents are the people who support something. An opponent are those who don't, are those who are opposing the assumption. So the Moore is saying that they are at odds with other beliefs that they unavoidably hold. So that he is essentially saying that they actually believe it, but they just deny it. All right. So how about if I don't understand A, I'm going to POE, but if I do, I'm going to choose A because look, Moore's careful work on common sense may seem. Oh, I'm sorry. Here. Know instinctively to be true, whether or not they profess otherwise. So this case is just future proof, saying that even if they disagree, they know instinctively that is true. So that is what A is saying. How about B, C, and D if I don't understand A? B, by arguing that it is valid to assert that some fact is true based on instinct, also valid to some proofs are inadequate based on instinct. So you can't really support text two, right? So D is, B is wrong because it's not supporting. B is supporting, and Moore is not really liking to support. C, by agreeing with those proponents, no, he's not conceding it to be wrong. He says that he is right, and even if he's proven wrong, he is instinctively right. That's future proof. D, by suggesting that instinctive distaste for Moore's position is proven. Sufficiently rigorous refutation, refute is deny of Moore. Instinctive distaste for Moore. So this is, D is basically saying that because they hate Moore, so they just deny him, whatever he says. So D is wrong. It's not scientific also, so D is wrong. That leaves us with A. Even if you understand A or not, the word at odds is at odds is like contrary to. At odds is the same as contrary to. Next, text 12. Okay, this one is such purist, they are known regard. So this saying that bluegrass is an entirely different music genre, and this one is says it's just an extension of folk traditions. Mixed genre should not be forbidden from incorporating from rock into its influences from rock. So this one is saying bluegrass is one kind of genre on its own, and text two is saying no, bluegrass is a mixed genre. So these are opposing, as inconsistent, illogical. These are all opposing, but let's see the reasoning. Enjoy music? No, this is not talking about anyone's satisfaction. Be unrealistic, have no way of enforcing. Nope, it's not forcing anyone to do anything. Short-sighted because bluegrass, not short-sighted, could enlarge audience. No, it's just arguing that the origin of bluegrass illogical because purists often overlook crucial aspects of how this first originated. D is correct because look, bluegrass stems from folk tradition to the era, and jazz and the blue. It stems from jazz, blue, and folk traditions. It's not an entirely different genre of its own, but a mix between different genres. So it is illogical because the origin, sorry, is a mixed one. So D is correct. 13, the last one. Historian, wait, let me just check. Have looked to ceramic vessels to understand daily life of Mosh people. These mold-made sculptures present plants in a more precise way. Have interpreted facial marking so detailed that marking to other skin irregularities. Some historians have used the skin diseases may have affected people at the time. Our historian, archaeologist LT, has argued that the interpretation of Mosh portrait vessels as hyperrealistic identified may inadvertently disregard. So this one is opposing, right? Disregard the creativity of the objects created. So this one is saying it's very, 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 very precise. And this one saying they're creative. So therefore it can't be precise. Most ceramic vessels, Trevor would argue, the artwork which support free imagination, using realistic object and people around the inspiration to explore more abstract concepts. Okay, so this is clearly opposing. This one is saying it's very detailed. So it's realistic, it's lifelike. And text 2 is saying it's very imaginative. It's not true. Let's see, these are, the woman here has nothing good to say about text 1 because it's opposing. Markings on deception, not necessarily portray. Markings on depiction of human face are not necessarily intended to portray particular details. So it might be imaginative. Let's see, B hasn't been damaged wrong. Not talking anything about excavation. Excavation is just simply you dig up the dirt to find old ancient objects deep underground. That's what excavation means. Depiction of human faces are significantly more realistic. Nope, she is not conceding. She is just disregarding the fact that she is opposing. Yeah. It is likely some depiction intended to portray some. Nope, she is definitely not supporting this one. These two are saying that this marking is historically accurate, but she says that is not intended to portray detail about physical appearance or of individuals. That means that she is denying it, opposing. All right. So these are A, B, C, and D. It doesn't say anything about like this, inconsistent or is. It doesn't have any initial clues for us to POE right away, but it seems as though the C and D, you can clearly see that it's supporting. So you're going to have to read it through as quickly as possible. Next, inferences. We're going to have to finish this before we can carry on to practice 1, 11, 12, 13. Actually, those I gave you guys because I didn't want to leave you guys on hold for the next session. But I clearly know that it's going to take a lot of time because I have a lot of things to explain in these two lessons, especially for those who are going to take the August SAT. I hope you get everything in the very last week. And I think on Friday, I would give August SAT and I wouldn't organize another session because I just forgot the mantra that I follow. Do not ever learn anything before the exam date. Don't even look back or don't even try to summarize everything you've learned because it has been proven ineffective. Because if you haven't learned anything throughout the duration, it won't serve you any purpose the very last day. So instead of just reorganizing your knowledge or just rereading everything, do not do anything for the Hung and Thumb. Don't learn anything on Friday. Just leave your mind at ease. Do not open your phone also. Don't use anything. Just be as peaceful as possible, right? So I would organize the Friday session but I will try to focus and try to fix everything on the tomorrow session, the Wednesday session. And yeah, it'll be more effective for you guys. Also less draining. Right, 5. Author Conan Doyle's story about Detective Sherlock Holmes were published between 1887 and 1927. They have inspired countless successful adaptations, including comic strips, movie, who celebrated in the stories were copyrighted until 2014. The right to adapt was only about who could afford to the copyright-free fee and gain approval from strict copyright holders of Doyle's estate. Journalists predict that the number is likely to increase since the end of copyright. Right, so this one is easier and less expensive. People more interested, nope. More interested is not proven. Former copyright, less fee, nope. No, it can't be less fee because this is the end of copyright. It's there's nothing to do with the copyright holders. It's just the law. It's not about the people, it's the law. The original stories will be hard to find. Nope, so it's A. Less expensive because they don't have to cover the copyright fee. 5, 6. Tides can deposit large quantities of dead vegetation within small salt marsh, smothering healthy plants and leaving salt pain. This one is quite difficult, as I recall, if I recall correctly. A depression devoid of plants that tend to strap standing water in the marsh's interior. Ecologist KB and colleagues from the burying crust. These pains improve drainage by loosening the soil, leading the pains to shrink as marsh plants move back in. Oh, however, Crow, remember to take notes on the transitions that clearly stating the contrasting relationship, for example, however, but, in contrast, everything like that. Those are the heaviest transition that you can get in a scientific paper. Induce soil marsh loss by accelerating erosion. Erosion is like losing dirt. Erosion causes flood. That's what erosion is, suggesting that the burying of action crabs can be beneficial with marshes with small pains, but harmful. Beneficial and harmful is correct, but if let's see, large pains, let's see, may promote increases in marsh plants or decrease in marsh plants depending on the carb's location. Tend to be more heavily concentrated in area of marsh interiors with standing water than at varies in intensity depending on the size of the pain relative to size. Varies in intensity. Nope, is not intensity. Burying of crabs, it doesn't say anything about the intensity, whether the amount of dirt being burrowed by crabs is more or less. It doesn't mention that information. C tends to be more heavily concentrated in areas of marsh interior. Edges I can find here. Edges. A, beneficial, harmful to large, small pans, large pans. Nope, doesn't say anything about large pans. C, tends to be more heavily concentrated, or it's B. This one says increase in marsh plants or decrease, which is good and bad. As we've seen, this one moves plants move back in, creates space for plants to move back in, and the latter part is losing, promoting marsh loss by accelerating erosion on the edges. So that is the location of the crabs, the crab's location. So C is incorrect. Right, 7. Through history, scholar I had Garner discussed John Johnson, a devoted collector of items intended to be discarded, including bus ticket and campaign pamphlets. Johnson recognized that scholarly institutions considered this expansive collection to be worthless. Indeed, it wasn't. I think we just did this the last session, so I'm just going to explain this briefly. Is B. Low regard means worthless, and it wants how later recognition, having grasped. So Oxford University acquired the collection because it grasped the potential value, because he was dead, so it's increased in value. So B. Yep. 8 is many cultures handshake can create trust between people. Engineers Joe Avellino and his team are designing a robot to shake hands with human in order to improve human-robot interaction. That's creepy. The robot hand adjusted its movement and pressure to better imitate the feel of human hand. A researcher want to prove it realistic because people are less likely to interact. I think it's true because they're trying to make people trust robots, right? Easier program, handshake programs. Nope. Does it say anything about greetings, other types of greeting? The robot in the researcher's study may have uses other than interacting with humans. So C is talking about other users. Wrong. Make people more comfortable. Oh, so more comfortable or less likely to interact. Don't look like humans. So this is wrong because it's only about the feel. It's not, this one doesn't say anything about the appearance of the robot. It only said about mimicking the movement of humans' handshake. It doesn't say anything about robots' appearance, right? So A, no, A is wrong. I'm sorry. D is correct. 9. How many questions are there? 14. 9. Researchers. I'm going to leave this one to let Lina finish this 9th question.
I choose B.
What is that?
I choose B.
B, right. Why is B?
They said that planes travel faster than trains, and boarding that rail travel doesn't. So short haul routes take similar amounts of time by air and by rail. However, rail passenger volumes approach current capacity limits and long lead times emerge. So I think that they should schedule additional trains for these routes.
Yes. So this one is saying that in short haul flights, short haul or short distance, train can be more effective than flights because of the procedures, right? Because of the procedures that airlines take. So in order for this to be beneficial, it will have to, however, is very important. Long lead time emerges when the rail passenger volumes approach the current capacity limit. So don't let this happen by B. Yeah, security is wrong. This one is not saying that the rail systems should implement what airlines doing because it will be a waste of time. A is more long haul routes. Wrong because it's saying to improve short haul doesn't mean that flight should be. It's not related, to be honest. D, passengers who travel by rail for these routes will need to accept that lead time will be. Nope. It's not. Well, you're not helping to reduce wait time by just accepting, right? So D is illogical. D is wrong. 10. 10. Hung, can you do this for me?
Let me share. And C.
Direction found why C? What does it say?
I don't remember how I did it.
Mm, okay, so let me check. C, profound impact. The name suggests dramaturges originated in theatre. They do historical research, compiling character biographies, and perhaps most important, helping writers of plays and musical to hone the work's stories and character. Hone is like improve, right? So if you hone your skill, you improve your skills. If you hone the work stories and character, you improve the stories and characters. Performance scholar Susan Manning observed that many choreographer like playwright and musical theatre writers concerned with storytelling and characterization. In fact, some choreographers describe the dances they create as expressions of narrative through movement. So many choreographers like describe the dances create expressions of narrative through movement. So they're just trying to paint a picture of a story, right? So some directors rely too heavily. Nope. Choreographer developing dances with narrative element frequently engage dramaturges to assist in refining those elements. Dances by incorporate are more accessible and doesn't say anything about the audiences. Develop dances with narrative elements frequently engage dramaturges to assist with refining those elements or dramaturges. Completes the texts. So this one is a conclusion. So reading B and C, I saw that B says something about choreographers. Ooh, choreographers, developing dancers, engage dramaturges. So choreographer uses help from dramaturges. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but dramaturges. But in this C, profound impact on artistic direction of plays and musical. So this one is not taking into account the latter part of the paragraph. Look, the first part, it's here talking about the use of dramaturges, the directors and help writing stories and stuff. But in the latter part, it says that choreographers, they help to paint a picture of the story. So I would think it makes more sense to conclude this sentence, this paragraph, by saying that choreographers, they use help. They use help from dramaturges to make their performance better. And C is only talking about dramaturges, so it's not correct, as I think. So B is way more precise when it comes to conclusion of this paragraph. So I think B is more correct. Let me just check it real quick. 10. Yeah, it's B, right? 11. Right, this one of purposes. I'm gonna leave it to Bike. Can you do 11 for me?
11 is 11. Oh wait, 2, 3, 4. 8.
A. Did you choose A?
Yes.
Let's see. Off-Broadway theaters emerged in the late 1950s as a rebellion against mainstream Broadway. She wrote Disney Maria working with off-Broadway, direct her own, but also as she intended to be staged, regardless of how strange. This way, this one is more talking about the production value and the
Oh, I read the wrong one. It's D.
all right, yes, it's D. All right. So why D?
Because it talks about uh how mm,
Why is it D?
freeing artists to create productions to so they gave artists like the freedom of choice.
Yes. So in this case, the conclusion that makes the most sense is the one that says that Maria Irene Fawns can use her creative freedom to do whatever she likes, even if how strange the result might have seemed to the audiences. So this is artistic opportunity or the creative freedom. So it's D. A is very much incorrect. B, recognize of more complicated than staging a Broadway play. Nope. It's talking about the benefit, right? This one is talking about the benefit. 12. 12. Can Dom do this for me?
12A.
Right. 12A. Look, this one is most likely agree that we're going to have to find a commonality that these two share. But do we? Just as in painting are typically thought as bold, expressive brushstrokes. In the 1970s, American painter Jack Whitten built a 12-foot, 3.5-meter tool he named Developer to apply paint the entire canvas in one motion, resulting in the series of slab paintings from that decade. Whitten described this process as making entire painting in one gesture, signaling a clear departure from the prevalence of gestures in his work from the 1960s. Some art historians claim the shift represents removing gesture from the process, therefore regarding whether using the developer can use a gesture. Both Whitten and the art historians likely agree that I don't think any tool can be used to create gestures is mentioned within the 12th question, because look, it's only ever mentioned about one tool, and that's about one person. And furthermore, they don't talk about the viability, or they don't talk about the spreadiness, the ease of use, the ease of creating this kind of tool. So I don't think A is correct because it puts the wrong focus. The focus here is one on the gesture. Duke's making way more gesture in 1960, and he removed it by using machines. So it doesn't have any strong stroke or light stroke like this. It's only ever to be very similar, spread out. So A, I don't think is correct. B, Whitten's work from the exhibits mean, yeah, this one is way more why I like it. How about D? Whitten's work from the 90s is much more realistic. Nope, it's not more realistic. It just have more gestures in it. It just Whitten became less interesting. Nope. So it's B, right? So it has picked, like, it's trying to distort detail. That's why this question is quite difficult, because it aims to confuse us with the question A, with the option A. In fact, I did know that question A would pose a bit of a trouble for some of you guys. That's why I asked them to do it. And any tool that, so if one mentions about any tools, it's not necessarily correct that if one mentioned one tool, it's not necessarily correct to say every any tool. Okay, so this puts the wrong emphasis. B, right? 13, let's see. In the book, pay as you wish pricing model. This model generally offers, or even pay nothing at all. Well, most listener. Oh, that or pay nothing. So most of the people don't even pay anything. Only about 1% opted to pay for the album, resulting in lower than expectation. But the author discussed using significant earning for pay as you wish, pay more than stores suggested price. So this may benefit this band, but not benefit may benefit Jane Siberry, but not Harvey Danger. Hold greater for bands than individual musicians. This is wrong because it has to is flipped. Yeah, this one is more beneficial for individual musicians than bands in this case. So B, A is wrong. How about B? Cause most musician to lower the suggested price. Nope, doesn't talk about that. For some musicians, but it's disappointing for others. It's quite correct. But they more strongly reflect differences in certain musicians' popularity. It doesn't say anything about popularity. It only says about the monetary benefits, the financial benefits. So C. Yeah, some are successful and some are very disappointing. For example, Harvey Danger. 14. Martin and Wu and colleagues have identified a new carnivorous plant species in Indonesia. Like other carnivorous plants, has pitfall traps or pitches that capture prey, but unlike others, the pitches of N are located underground. The researchers unearthed the new species on fairly dry ridges with surfaces that host few plants or animal. Therefore, they hypothesized that likely buried by nearby animals that as they forage along the ridges for food. Nope, this is a carnivorous plant, so it eats animal, and herbivorous, herbivore or herbivorous plants, no, herbivorous animals are the animals that eat plants, and carnivorous animals are the animals that eat animals. Okay, the same thing applies for plants, and that's just an adjective. And therefore, hypothesize that A is wrong. Evolved to have underground traps to access more prey than would surface traps. More prey, because on the land there are not a lot of plants and animals. Let's see, form pitches early in development to absorb more moisture. Located underground. No, this is saying that pitches serves as a function of absorbing more moisture, but in this case, it doesn't provide any information about it providing more moisture, although this is a fairly dry ridges, but it doesn't say anything about the use of pitches. Represents one of the many undiscovered carnivorous plants. No, I don't think so. It's not really mentioned, so it's B, right? So it says that on the surface, there are not many other plants and animals. So this one is evolved to trap more prey underground, located underground, because it's located in the ground. So in areas that have a lot of animals that above ground, it's not thriving, but as evolutionary purposes has proven, this plant is underground for the places that has little to no bugs or animal on the surface, so that it can trap more of them. So that's it, I guess. Yeah, 14. That's the final question. And do you guys have any more questions for today's lesson? I'm sure you guys seem sleepy already. Yeah, it's just beginning of the night. So if you guys don't have any more questions, that concludes our class for today. Don't hesitate to reach out, because I think after like 2 or 3 times of rereading, you re-watching this video, this recording or whatever, you can make it, I mean, make sense of it somewhat. And if you have any questions, just ask me freely, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.